And so I'm going to jump right in and introduce everyone. I'm really excited to talk about networking while social distancing. And I'm really excited to be joined by a few different people. So today we're joined by Landi Spearman, CEO of Organized Shift. We're also joined by Dee Poku-Spalding, founder and CEO of WIE, Kristy Wallace, CEO of Ellevate, and then Natasha Green, the Senior Local Communities Manager of Anita Borg Institute. And so I am super excited. And I think there may have been a miscommunication in who should be moderating the chat. So I can go ahead and moderate the chat if everyone is okay with that and feels comfortable with that. Perfect. So give me just 1 second. And so I think this is a very obviously timely talk. But also, I mean, networking is something that we deal with all the time, right? People are always looking for jobs. So I want to pose the question, as millions lose their job during the COVID-19 pandemic and seek to re-enter the workforce, how will networking adapt in the era of social distancing? And I know we have a few different people on, so I will pass this to you, Dee, as you are off of mute already.
Yes, I'm always eager and ready to go. I mean, obviously it's a big change because we're now sort of unable to connect in person. And so our entire lives have shifted online. And so it's required us to double down on sort of specific skills. Like I would say that, my writing skills in particular are the ones that I'm really honing at the moment, because I think all of our communication is written, whether it's through social media, whether it's through email. That first contact is not in person, and so you're trying to make that first impression through what you write. And so that's really for me, that's been a big change. And I think it's just really about also if you're trying to meet new people, it's harder to sort of do that more spontaneously. It's really, you have to sort of focus on doubling down on your existing connections and getting introductions through them, as opposed to just sort of, it's very hard to sort of randomly meet people. And so I think it's, for me, like the big change has really been everything being digital and a lot more emphasis on how we communicate through the written word.
Insightful. If I can just add to that, and hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. So when you just spoke to the fact that the written communication is so critical and important, even how we're showing up now, I just love all these faces, right? So I've met a couple folks who have said, I didn't know that I was going to become a set designer and figure out what was going on behind me. So when you think about social networking and doing it from a distance, how you show up matters. The lighting, your profile, everything that you have a chance for people to see your offline profile, as I say, before you get online. And so what does that mean? How do you show up? How do you show up offline? How would you show up if we were meeting in person? Making sure that that is coming through when you are online. And so Dee Poku, the fact that you're speaking about your written communication being so critical and important right now, I would also like to add even LinkedIn, when we were thinking about our LinkedIn profile, taking a look at that picture again. And I'm going to tell you all, I'm in Texas, so I have big hair. It has changed as the humidity has kicked in. So when you think about from your profile picture to right underneath your name, if you did not know, that is a place for keywords. So when you think through, okay, what do I want to be known for, even if it's not what you're doing today, and the fact that we're dealing with this pandemic, the reality of it is many of us are changing jobs. Many of us are making choices and decisions. Well, LinkedIn, right underneath your name, that first set of characters, all of those can be used as keywords. So keep that in mind, because you get to be whoever you want to be, and your profile should reflect what that looks like. or however you're walking into your future. Kristy, would you like to add?
Yeah, Landi, thank you. I think that to expand upon what you're saying, because I really love that, and the keywords and the intentionality of how we're building networks and who we want to connect with. It's about being consistent in a lot of the content that you're putting out there too. When we talk about networking, it's about, you know, the give and the get, the building of the community, the ecosystem, it's ongoing. And so if there's areas that you have expertise in or areas that you're really passionate about, you know, how you continue to share content relevant to that to kind of help refine that brand, and how you engage with others who have shared ideas, shared passions. It's all about how these little micro actions that you can take every single day can continue to build into a much bigger, dynamic, and engaging community and network.
I love that. Micro actions, not microaggressions. That's been a topic of our conversations lately. Would you like to add? Who else would like to add to that?
So absolutely. And so there's this way of being soft networking, I'm going to start saying, and hard, or sort of forthright networking. I don't want to say aggressive. And it's this concept of, yeah, soft networking is the idea of you may be writing a Medium post, or we're showing someone, oh, this is my LinkedIn. But when you start thinking about forthrightness, or, hey, I want to meet people who know Amazon Web Services, or I want to connect with someone reading a book about race, what you start seeing that I believe is going very well, especially nowadays, in different Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups, you start telling people your intentions, right? I intend to read this book on racism. I intend to learn how to be a solution architect. Anybody wants to join me? Even behind me, I have PMP books. My goal is to take the PMP exam. And so there's this other level of networking that it might take you out your comfort zone, but on the other hand, it wouldn't, especially if it's something you want to get out of it. So case in point, I want to pass this test in 3 months. Who wants to hang out with me? How do we learn together? And that's another way of connecting with other people with similar mind and thought, because you never know where that person goes. You never know when you see each other again. And these are total strangers. So that's another idea as it relates to networking during the social distancing time.
That was great. I was saying, no, not I. I know about that PMP and the PMBOK and all of that good stuff. So we wish you the most of luck. Let's take it a step deeper. So when we're thinking about connecting in community and seeing who wants to join on, we all know that there are groups that already exist. There are groups everywhere online. And I don't know about you, but I get about 1 or 2 invites to a new group every week. So how do you choose which group you join, and how do you engage? Can you give a couple tips on how you engage in those groups?
So I would say the first thing you need to do is you need to sort of take a step back and think about what your needs are. And so rather than just sort of blindly joining groups because you're trying to build out your community, what is it that you need first? What do you have? What are your strengths? Where are you over indexing in your relationships? Where are the gaps? And so like really do that work with yourself first, and just think about, you know, both your goals and also like where you're trying to get to. And so once you've done, you know, that specific work, it allows you to then, you know, see where the gaps are and then and where to go from there. So if you are, you know, trying to get a job at a specific company, or you are trying to get into a specific discipline, you now know that, you know, these are the areas where I have gaps, and this is, you know, what I need to do in order to get there. I think you also need to look at your Rolodex. I'm going to use the old-fashioned word. I hope everyone knows what one is.
Tell them, what is it? What is a Rolodex? What is your online Rolodex? What does that look like?
Well, your online Rolodex, you know, it's different because, you know, if you took the old-fashioned definition of Rolodex, it was really like this sort of clunky thing that sat on your desk.
Don't date yourself. With don't do
little cards. Whereas now, you know, your Rolodex is everywhere. You know, it's not only your LinkedIn friends, it's your Instagram friends, it's your Facebook friends, it's everyone who's in your email inbox. Like it sort of spans your entire digital presence. And so we have more, like I think often people don't realize just how much they have already at their fingertips, and they start sort of searching rather than sort of doubling down on what they have. But anyway, I'm digressing. So once you sort of know where your gaps are, that help, then allows you to identify which groups you should join, what makes sense for you. Is it the Women in Tech group on Facebook, or is it, the wellness group, on Instagram, like, or the people you should follow. So once you can sort of identify where you need to be, and then once you're there, then it becomes about engaging. I've been hosting a lot of online masterclasses, and I'm starting to see the same faces. And I've been, it's been interesting to see how the women, are sort of using the space to subtly network. Like there are founders who are suddenly posting 30% discounts, in the chat. There is a woman who just started a new business who has changed her profile names from just being her name to her name and her business. So there are all these like really subtle ways to start sort of communicating who you are and what it is you want. And then it really becomes about engaging online. And I would argue that it's almost easier to do that than to be at an intimidating event or at a party where you have to go up to people. It's so much easier online to agree with what somebody said, or give them a high five, or like just sort of be that positive presence, and that sort of takes you quite a long way.
That was great. You get a lot of great nuggets there. So just making sure we heard engagement is important, and I want to take that a step further. Being very intentional, so understanding what your needs are. So when you think through your needs, and you use the word over-indexing, I thought that was amazing. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's take it a step further. Let's talk through, you also talked about women engaging, and some of the things that we do to engage. And we know that women tend to want to build and make relationships first. I mean, even here, we've all seen each other and been posted about each other, right? It's like, hey, when are we going to meet? When do we get to connect? So how do you take that need and want to engage personally and turn that into a professional relationship? Can we speak a little bit about that to make sure we're being intentional? Kristy, you want to take that?
Sure, I'm happy to take that. A lot of it comes down to the effort you put into it. And I say that because it's easy to sign up for many communities, and it's fine to sign up for communities and be passive and, follow the posts and get information. But to really get the full benefit, it's about how you engage with that community, how you are posting, how you are showing up for others, how you are making those connections. So for example, I'm a part of a community that has a Slack channel. Other than my initial introduction, I haven't been engaging with it. And that's a miss on my end, right? That's not a fault for that community. It's because I haven't been putting the work in to get the benefit out. There's other communities I'm a part of. And when I talk about communities, I'm the CEO of Ellevate. It's a large community of women at work, but there are many communities for women, for different identities, for different interests. And it's about finding, as Dee said, the right place for you. Where do you want to be? Where do you feel welcome? Where do you feel heard and listened to and supported? But then what is your bandwidth in terms of putting in the effort to get the value out of it? Because community is a two-way street. So by engaging in that community, by sharing your knowledge, by posting things that are interesting to you, by responding to others, that's your contribution that is benefiting other people. And it goes both ways. For me, in terms of, building deeper relationships, I meet people in many different ways, right? If it's a parent at my kid's school, or if it is someone I spoke on a panel with, someone I met at an event, and those connections happen, and it's about continuing to make that a reality. Hey, do you want to have a quick chat? Do you want to, meet up for coffee? Or virtual coffee? But you have to keep building in the time to reach out to people, to engage with them and connect with them. So one thing I do is I have a running list in my calendar where I keep track of all of the people that just really appreciate having in my life and in many different places in my life. And I'm very intentional about, each week checking in and saying, did I follow up with people? Did I check in? How are you doing? Did I share a piece of content that I thought they would find interesting? Did I send just a quick text to say, I'm thinking of you, how are you doing? And that's how you continue to build relationships professionally and personally that show that you're genuine, that you care, that you're putting in the work, because you really are investing in them and investing in what comes out of that relationship.
Yeah,
really,
can
really
I
good.
jump on that one?
Please, Dee,
Quickly.
come with it. Yes, we need this.
Well, no, I loved what Kristy said, and specifically, I keep, because I meet so many people, because I also run a women's leadership community, and so I'm always meeting people, and it becomes very hard to keep track. And so I keep a spreadsheet, which is very Virgo of me, but I can't go against my star sign. And so I keep this spreadsheet. And so whenever I meet anybody in whatever context, I just add it to my spreadsheet at the end of every day, who they were, what they did, briefly, what the connection was, and then any follow-up. And I may not, like, the follow-up is is the key. It's not the meeting of people, it's the follow-up that you do. And so that for me is like the importance of having the spreadsheet. Obviously life gets in the way. You have kids, you have a family, you have your work. So it's very hard to sort of follow up very quickly sometimes. But if you have a system that keeps you on track, then it might just be that, on Sundays you do all your follow-ups. But just ensure that follow-up piece isn't missing by having some sort of systematic way of keeping track of everything.
That was great. I see in the comments that the spreadsheet idea was thought to be a great idea, and I agree. I'm sure, Natasha, I'm sure you have a ton of ideas. What are you all doing over at Anita B? And if you would kind of share a little bit about what's worked and give a couple tips about how to make this effective for our panel, our attendees.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to point out what Kristy did with her whole Ellevate network. What she did when she decided to repost this and tag everyone, I was thinking she worked for Power to Fly. I was like, she's amazing. Like, did they hire her? And just when she made the connection, like, no, she saw that, hey, they asked, can y'all share? Can you do this? And she kept on sharing on all platforms. And then I reshared on top of her share. And so now everyone has eyes on Ellevate, right? So one of that idea of building is you reshare, you might add one or two things. Oh, I'm going to be here. Are you going to be here? Right. And so it's not only a conversation on just resharing a post, it's now additional thing like, oh, Tasha's going to be there. Okay, I'm going to be where Tasha is. They probably don't even know what I'm talking about, but when they see you somewhere, they want to be with you. So I think Kristy did a great job with that. That's why I definitely remember you. Another thing that was said earlier about with the CMs, the community managers, we love if people reach out to us or say, hey, can I help you with something? Or better yet, if I post some random sort of picture and then you reply, oh my God, this is an amazing picture. I'm like, okay, good. Someone saw me, someone heard me. That was a good thing. That is networking at the most simplest level, right? Someone push or sends out and then you received it and then you articulate, hey, I saw that. Something else about community that I think is very important, besides the fact that the community manager, excuse me for saying CM, knows you, because if the CM knows you or the group manager, you could say, I'm into ed tech, or I'm into, learning how to network better. And usually some of the great facilitators like Dee could tell you and Kristy, they remember everyone. I don't know how they do it. I remember some people. You got to come back to me more than once for me to remember you. But I felt that's something that people don't do enough. And one more point is about add value, get value, right? So going back to the idea of what I choose, I'm in this group and it's a wonderful group manager. I just love her to death. And a group manager, a group that you are with, the benefits or seeds are planted. If you could say 4 years ago, I was in this group, or I met connections through this group, or if I post out and ask, or I say, hey, I have an offer, someone to speak at an event, when people like respond, I'm not going to respond to everybody in the group. I don't have kids. So if someone's asking about maternity questions, I'm not going to go now post on their post. That's not smart for me. right? But if someone says, hey, I'm interested in building up a passion project or this, that, and the other, I'm like, oh, this is up my alley. Hey, connect with me, boom, boom, boom. I have some time for a virtual coffee, right? So it's really understanding. And back to Dee's point, don't be posting or hijacking someone's mastermind. There's better ways to do it. Please just be very cognizant that you don't want to be that type of person, right? Like, even if we're all in a conversation in public, we're not just going to come in and say, here's my, okay, some people do it. Here's my business card, 30% off. No, that's not sexy. Don't do that, right? Because there's always time for you to meet the appropriate people when you're in the appropriate environment.
Thank you. Thank you. So many good nuggets there. One of the things that I heard you speak to is just when you're in a group and posting, almost like the etiquette, group etiquette. I would also like you all to speak a little bit about etiquette when you're on something like this. If you're in the chat, how do you communicate? How do you connect? Should it just be that you connect to the panelists? Should you also, hint, hint, drop in your LinkedIn information in the chat so that you can connect that way? How would you all suggest, are there ways that you can suggest that people connect, not just to the people who are at what I call the front of the room, but also the people who are in the room with you?
Let me jump in, y'all, because I just love this thing that I've learned the past couple. So what you saw that I did early was I've already placed a link to saying, hey, add your LinkedIn, add how you want to connect in this document, because someone will definitely start hijacking. I was on a call with 200 people, and then people wanted to put their LinkedIn and it was scrolling really fast. I'm like, no, there must be a better way, God, there must be a better way. And so I know the Excel sheet is very hacky, but going back to Dee's point, you know, at least now I could come back to this Excel sheet and befriend everyone versus now seeing a scroll of LinkedIn. So I feel like that's been very beneficial on a lot of the meetings we had at AnitaB.org, because you should give people a place, right, to try to share out, because that's community. And it's just bad karma if someone is like, no, this is my Zoom, or this is and I don't want you to meet anyone. The success metrics for any community event, in my eyes, is that someone was able to meet someone else, get the nuggets that they were supposed to get, and be like, boom, we're going to connect afterwards. Because then you are the conduit. Like, you are the person that allowed someone to meet someone else, which I think is a good thing. Connectors.
That's what this is about, right? We're talking about connecting during social distancing. You all, please keep the questions coming in. Thank you so much for having them. We're going to take a moment to address some of the questions in the chat. Dee, did you want to jump in on that as well with a suggestion?
So, I mean, you know, what I've noticed as far as the people who've sort of caught my attention is, one, they usually just say hello. I mean, it's such a simple thing, but, you know, you join a panel like this, or you join a community, like, just say hi and introduce yourself. And when you say hi and introduce yourself, like, don't make it too much of a hard sell, because then people zone out. So it's like, introduce yourself for sure, but think about the art of introduction. And you know, and I think that isn't that much different from the way you would do that in person. So if you met somebody, you wouldn't just launch into your resume. Like, they would probably find that, you know, the quickest exit. And it's the same with, you know, if you're in an environment like this, or if you have joined a community, it's like, introduce yourself and think about a way to tell your story in a way that's engaging. Like, I saw someone do that recently where she went, it was actually almost like her entire resume, but she told such a compelling story. Like, it was like riveting. And so it wasn't, I worked here and then I did this and I did that, but it was funny and poignant and self-deprecating, and like, and it read really well, which is, you know, going back to my point about your written skills. And so I think that's a really key way. And then I've always believed in, but, you know, both in person and online, like, just like in making other people feel good, in, you know, as a way to sort of connect them to you, right? Because everyone, like, we're human beings, we respond to compliments, we respond to praise, we respond when we feel seen in any way. And so if someone says something in a group forum that you agree with, that you think is great, tell them. And, you know, again, that's a way to sort of, you know, build a bond with that person, and it allows you to sort of to share on that platform in a way that doesn't feel aggressive and actually feels like you're contributing.
Kristy, did you want to add? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I know Dee personally before this, and like that comment is such an embodiment of who she is, and I love it, and I want to amplify that. I think absolutely kindness is so important. I also really loved how Dee brought up kind of your story. Oftentimes it can be easy to just like throw your LinkedIn into the chat, but giving some more context as to, you know, it doesn't have to be a huge paragraph, but I would love to connect with other people in Seattle, or I'd love to connect with, you know, those passionate about this topic and exploring it further. I mean, what is that ask to kind of connect with, draw people in? Similar to at events, you know, I might be at a live event and someone asks a question, and I think to me, like, wow, that person's great. That was a great question. You can connect with people one-on-one in these events. You can send individual messages and say, hey, I loved that you asked this question. I really appreciate the comment you made here. That's a way to take this bigger forum and make it smaller, make it those one-on-one connections really start to happen. And the final thing that I would say, which is something I've really been working towards, is I've been at a lot of events that then break out into smaller groups. And I'm pretty introverted. That is one of the scariest moments when you start the pop-up and it's like, you're going to go into breakout. And I always want to hang up because it feels really overwhelming. But those tend to be the deeper connections, the more meaningful interactions, the greatest value. It's just those smaller group conversations, getting to meet people, getting to talk about whatever you're talking about. So I just encourage you to take advantage of all the innovation and all of the disruption that's happening during this time. The smaller groups, some of the bigger forums, engaging with people in the chat, find what works for you. We're not all exactly the same. We don't all communicate the same, but the big ask is to take some action that feels like you're able to really get the value out of that event versus being just a passive participant who's doing your email and kind of half listening. And then at the end, it's like, oh, what did I get out of that? And there's so much value, especially I've heard great things about the event today. There's a lot of other great content out there and live events. So I encourage you to find what works for you and, you know, push yourself in the uncomfortable. You can do it. And just, you know, look at how you build those connections.
I'm super excited to get on the next one right after us is the keynote. I'm like, I can't wait to connect. And I was thinking about how did I connect to a couple folks who are even here. One of the things was going and tagging each of the folks on LinkedIn. So we talked about that. But can you not share? If someone is sharing information that resonates with you or resonates with something that you care deeply about, can you not pick up that link and share that as well and maybe tag that person? When people are speaking, and as you said, Kristy, sometimes, you know, we're half engaged because we're doing this constantly. What can you take a nugget or a quote or something that you got from there and maybe send that back to that person? Tag them in their own mailbox. So when you spoke about being an introvert, and I want to flip there next and talk about truly, if you're an introvert and being who you are, how can you connect socially from a distance? How can you get in there? We're giving some tips, but how can you really connect to people to let them know that you're here when it might be hard for your voice to be heard, or how do you stand out? Who wants to take that one?
I mean, I can start with that. This is something I've thought a lot about on a personal level over the years. I previously was in a sales role, which it came through my network. A friend from college said, you should totally take this job. And I said, no, that's not for me. I'm not a salesperson. And she said, yes, you would be great at it. And I said, no. And she said, yes. And I said, no. And then finally I said, yes. And I was really good at it and I loved it. But I loved it because I made it authentic to who I am. Oftentimes we think about sales, we think about networking, or we think about a lot of these things as it's dirty, it's scary, it's intimidating. But it's really, what does that mean for you? How do you engage in that in a way that feels right to you and feels authentic? For me, I'm really a one-on-one connection person. I thrive on the one-on-one connections. I don't thrive walking into a room with 100 people where I'm whining and dining and smoozing. I thrive on just making those one-on-one conversations. I could sit in the corner with one person the whole time and be really happy. So I just try to think about that and how I build my connections and relationships. I do engage with people on social media. I follow people. I like what they do. I might send them a private message. That's not an ask. It's just a thanks for posting this. I really appreciate what you did here. I send people emails or texts. I'm always thinking in my brain, who would find this relevant? Who would like this? Someone might pop into my head and I'll just send them a quick note. I don't just, oh yeah, I wonder how they're doing. I'll follow up with it later and then let it go. So it's just become for me something that I do with intention. I'm building connections when I think of people, when I think something's relevant, when I like what someone says, I say it and I'm genuine with it. And that's helped me over the years to really build deeper one-on-one relationships, which those sales contacts I had 20 plus years ago are still friends of mine and still people that support me. And it's thinking about it as a long-term game. It's not just a short-term win. It is really long-term. You got to put in the effort and you got to put in the work to build the depth of those relationships. I also want to echo something Dee said earlier around the follow-up. And the follow-up is so important. I don't know how many times people have put in a lot of effort to get, a phone call with me or a meeting, to connect with me at an event, and then I don't ever hear from them again. And I want to hear from them. We talked, we had a meeting, we followed up. And so when it's not just, the work isn't just getting that meeting, it's about how you continue to expand upon that over time and how you look at this as a relationship and not just, a one-time thing.
So good. That's so good. And we have a couple of comments about the follow-up. Anybody else want to want to add to that? Like, how else do you follow up? What if it's someone that you knew and you fell off from, to your point, Kristy, and then you need to follow back up and again, any suggestions?
Yeah.
I mean,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Dee.
Okay. So, it's interesting. I was asked to give to host a workshop by a company, and they really wanted me to sort of provide a list of follow-up lines, like, this is what you say. And it was just so sort of alien to me and who I am. I just couldn't do it, because I could never advise someone to have like a list of follow-up phrases and like, this is what you say, or this is like, in the same way that a cheesy pickup line from a guy isn't going to work for you. I think that the same applies to your sort of networking communications. Like, I'm just such a fan of authenticity, as Kristy said, and just tailoring your message to people. So I think that the way that you streamline the process is, one, going back to like knowing who you are, knowing your story, like, what is your sort of elevator pitch? Like, you should always have a strong sense of who you are and how you introduce yourself and how you want to sort of come across in any.
Can you give us an example, Dee? Can you give us your elevator pitch?
My elevator pitch?
Yes.
I mean, so, I will always say, I'm Dee Poku, I'm the founder of WIE, and I'm the founder of a community for women leaders and creators. And so that's sort of, that's not like the full, but that's sort of, it's very short. And what I'm trying to get across is that I build community. It's for a very specific demographic, and it's about women. And so, and it's very succinct. And so, and then that you sort of build from that, so you can elaborate on, it's a community that's focused on women taking action for other women, or like, so then you sort of have the layers that you build on top of that. And so I think that you should, it's like having versions of your bio, your sort of long and short bio. You should have your elevator pitch sort of really honed and ensure that it's, telling people what it is think about like how you want to come across, and like have that sort of honed so that it, it's easy and rolls off your tongue. And then I think that as far as, were we talking about follow-up?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So
any other tips? Those were questions from our
yes. And so
yeah.
I just think that you need to, the follow-up, whether it's someone you just met or someone you met, you knew 10 years ago, you need to pick up whatever that thread was, right? You need to pick up from that thread. Like, you don't just launch into the thing that you want, the thing that you need, because that's just not going to get you any results. So pick up the thread from whatever your last conversation was, whatever your last interaction was, and sort of take it from there. Or like find, a personal, an anecdote, or, maybe your Facebook friends and you saw they had a baby. Like, just think about what is the thread that's going to connect to whatever it is you want and the reason that you're connecting with them. And make that personal and make that tailored. And then the rest can be, the pitch. But make sure that there is like some authenticity, and that your message is always tailored, because otherwise people, so no, I just delete.
So you want tailored message, custom, be you. It sounds like when you say authentic, be you, it's not anything abstract. It's actually who you are. Show up as yourself.
Show up as yourself.
Yeah.
Custom, the first couple of lines is really, it doesn't matter if it's someone you know or don't know. Like, if it's someone you don't know, look them up. What was the last thing they did that was interesting? Make that part of your intro line. Like, I never advise like just going straight in for the ask. That someone else may say different, but I just know that I find that jarring.
Thank you for sharing that. Tasha, would you speak about that a little bit? What are your thoughts about following up? And can you also talk a little bit about mentorship? How do you connect with mentors potentially when you're thinking about virtual networking?
Yeah, absolutely. So y'all need to know my personality. And you need to know what my strengths are. You need to know what I'm doing in my day. Like, why would you follow up with me? So you're not going to follow up with me like, oh, how's your day going? Like, no, but why do I know how my day's going? Like, you don't need to know how my day's going, right? Like, if you're following up with me and you're like, hey, I really, I heard you speak on Power to Fly, and I would love to get some time to talk about networking. So number one, you just did what Dee did. You find a connector. Two, you did something that I love to do, to talk to others one-on-one, like Kristy said. And it's important because I am actually an introvert, right? I'm a community manager, but yet I do have to talk and engage. But I have a strength of one-on-one. I have the strength of where are you now? Where would you like to go, right? I believe in people's passions, and I would like to help them get to where they have to get to. Right. And so that's really important, because I know tons of folks, like one mentor I have, I actually just went up to her after she talked, and I listed or said some stuff after in her speech. I was like, hey, this is who I am. I got 3 masters. I'm this, I got my own business, blah, blah, blah. And I just came down to, I am lost and will love some insight. Right. And then it was just one of those things that she thought I said something that made sense to her, and she had time. I found who she was, and I was like, I would like this person to connect with me. Some other mentorships I have are actually friend mentorships, right? Because there are people who are my friends, they're in their 50s, I'm in my 30s, but I still have like respect for them, but we could sit out and go have wine and chill, right? And so if you know that I'm about volunteerism, I'm about impact the lives of women and kids, right? I'm about tech. I'm about starting businesses, right? That's what you talk to me about. But if you want to talk about recruitment, your resume, your LinkedIn profile, how to beautify it, go to Landi. Go to someone who could talk to you about that. I'm like, nope, just say that, I'm not going to be that person. So that's about you doing your homework. I think that's very important. I also believe mentoring is peer mentorship, because as I sit here and listen to my panelists, I'm hearing how the others are talking or navigating and what they're doing, and how, they're replying to the questions. And I'm taking notes like, oh, I love that. Like, I'm going to try that later. Right. And so don't think you have to have this lofty mentor who has 6 figures and SVP. Sometimes this mentorship is that one person you hear consistently, like Barbara WIE. I love her. She's from Intel, doing great D&I work. My boss, Brenda Darden-Wilkerson. I love her. I love it when she talks on the conversations with Brenda. Right. So know that mentorship is sometimes formal, and it could be informal. It could be the person you read about in a book. It could be the person that you follow all the time on YouTube. So just be very clear of what's your temperament: introvert, extrovert, ambivert.
How much ambivert?
Both.
Yeah.
Both.
I guess I should have worked that out.
Oh, no worries. But and it's like how Dee just asked that question. Don't be afraid to ask a question. So I hope that helps. You really do got to understand what you have time for, where you are, right? A college student might not want to talk to me right now. Like, you might be like, okay, she's too much. But someone who's getting into a career, knowing that I work for needtobe.org, knowing that I'm planning recruitment events and all this kind of stuff, might be like, oh, Tasha, I might talk to her about membership or this, that, and the other, right? I might talk to Ellevate about, I love the women empowerment. I love how they're connecting. Someone just gave a shout out. Sometime Jennifer gave a shout out. It was just like, I love Ellevate. I'm like, okay, I guess Ellevate might be something I look into. So that's how it works. Stuff starts firing in your mind, like, and then you go to that next step.
And like you said, you're pulling from your peers, you're learning from a couple of different angles. I love that. So I would like each of you all to think outside of the box. Think about a pivot. We're in a space when we think about COVID and pandemic and everything that we've never experienced before. Tell us a time that you were in a position where you needed to pivot and you were either comfortable, uncomfortable, but you actually needed to change in the moment. Help us to think outside of the box, whatever that moment may be.
I could go because, I'm already in the mood of talking. Listen, okay, does it have to be about network? Could it be about a life experience? It's fine.
Because we're talking about who we are, that's exactly what we want. We want to hear that you're human.
Yes. I have an archery business. I do. I have
what?
Archery, bow and arrow, catnip, Hunger Game. Yeah.
Who would have ever thought? Like going to the grocery store is easy for you because you know how to do it with the Hunger Game.
No, I mean, because I was a teacher. I was a math teacher for a couple of years. Like,
All right, share your story, please.
And so I wanted to bring archery to Black and brown students in the Bronx, New York. Like, that's what I wanted to do. And I started a business, Hidden Gems Archery. And my model was based on we're mobile and we bring archery into schools. I do corporate client, like we did all of that corporate client, but my focus was schools, right? There's thousands of schools in New York City, and obviously something could happen with at least 100 of them, right? Make it financially stable. And so what happened was COVID, right, came through, and I was actually sick. Like the top of the year, like COVID started. I think I had some trace of something. I'm not to declare it, but I was sick. So at the time COVID happened, schools started shutting down here in New York City. Not only did it shut down, my contracts shut it down, right? So here I am going into 2020, contracts with My Brother's Keepers, contracts with Gems, contract like schools, and I'm hyping up my team, like, yeah, it's gonna be a great year. And then COVID comes, and then I'm like, oh goodness, are you serious? But I didn't have time to mourn the money loss, right? I couldn't mourn it because I was sick. So I was trying to breathe. I couldn't breathe 100%. And so what happened during this time where I decided to pivot, I decided to say, you know what, Tasha, you're good at building teams. It's okay that archery has lost a lot of money. You're still able to pay for the storage and, you'll think about stuff later. So the pivot I made was the PMP exam because I was trying to do it since 2018, right? But because I was traveling so prolifically and doing stuff for needtobe.org, which I love, right? Because I was a volunteer with needtobe.org before I even was hired, right? So I have a long-term relationship with the organization. And so I was like, all right, let me start doing PMP study groups. So out of the whole, not the masses life, I started this whole concept, facilitated study groups, right? Where people pay to be basically accountable to studying for the PMP. And that made me happy because I still didn't pass the PMP, right? So why would people pay someone who didn't pass it? Maybe because I'll hold you accountable. I didn't sell you on the fact that you'll pass. I sold you on the fact that you'll be accountable and we'll talk every morning at a certain time. So the pivot will just have to be something that's in your strength, especially when you're like, I don't want to do anything. I'm losing money. Don't lose friends though. Lose acquaintances. Do not lose friends.
That's good, Tasha.
Just about knowing who you are and then going from there. So that was my pivot. And I'm happy about it, sort of, because now I have to figure out post-COVID, what does archery look like? So I'm in that phase now, and I might go to a mastermind, but I am going to pay for education. And that's one thing. People need to invest. Either you invest in Dee, Landi, Kristy. Do I say your name wrong? Kristy. you need to invest in a membership or a group that will help you in any way that's possible, because I know that's what I'm going to have to do, because I need to open my mind like Landi asked, because I'm still restricted in my business model, and I do have to step foot outside of the box.
So Tasha, what you spoke to, and Dee, I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. What you spoke to is something that I want to make sure that we all get from this. When we're thinking about social distancing and thinking about networking, sometimes it's not natural for us. Or thinking about, what do I present? How do I do it succinctly, short? How do I get to that person that I need to talk to who doesn't quite know me just yet? Well, what you really spoke to was those transferable skills. You really spoke to the fact that you took who you were, you understood it, you took some time to explore it, and then you took that and you placed it in another place when that time was there, when the need arose. And you didn't wait for it. You didn't wait for someone to tell you. And so that piece of outside of the box, I'll use my little water bottle here. When I think about the label, like, we can all see the label, right? So if you think about, if you're inside the water bottle, if this is you and you're in here and you can't see your label, how do you show up? How do you know how and what you show up as? How do you know what people think about you or what your skills are? If you don't know, one of those things you can do is ask. And you can take those skills and you can pivot and take them wherever you were like. Kristy spoke about that when she spoke about going from who she was into sales, and now from sales into who she is now with Ellevate. So those skills, those transferable skills, you hold on to those. Dee, please talk a little bit about a pivot or a time that you can share with us that's an authentic story, just the way that Tasha did.
Well, I don't know if I came up with anything that great, but so I'm just pivoting right now. So I'm just gonna, speak about the now. So, I've been building a community that's really anchored around in-person connection. So I'm a real P2P person, like I'm a real person-to-person person. And so I've been, building a community that was anchored around women sort of meeting. It's like part supper club, part community. We would get together and like have these incredible conversations and connections around dinner. And so I was getting ready to sort of go, more public with this idea when COVID hit. And I had a sort of a bunch of people who were sort of joining, and then they suddenly sort of hit the pause button, and everything that I was sort of about to launch and all of my materials and everything that was sort of geared towards this sort of in-person connection community had to be thrown out the window. And I have to say, I was frozen for a little bit, I was frozen also because I was homeschooling. So that I wasn't expecting to add that job title to my resume. And so, and I would say that I'm not really a digital person, I'm a real sort of, in-person person. And so, I have had to really hone those skills. And so after sort of feeling frozen for a little bit and thinking, oh, well, that's that, I started doing what, I do best, which is sort of bring people together. And we started sort of having conversations, with the existing community. And what I've realized is that in a way, COVID has been not a blessing, but it's sort of revealed, there's been a silver lining has been revealed or unveiled, which really sort of brought the community together online in a way that I wasn't expecting before. I've now actually come up with a tech product based on what I've seen happening online that I never would have come up with before, that I want to sort of, maybe raise money for. And so sometimes out of adversity comes opportunity. And so I feel like this whole process has really brought that to light for me.
That's fair. And you said your story wasn't amazing. That really, that did something for me, because I do agree with you that out of all of the unrest and everything that we're all facing, oftentimes change is necessary through the cracks. It's through the broken. It's not through what's fixed and perfect. And so even when I was using the example of the bottle and how you're showing up, If you don't know, ask someone. If you're not sure, if you don't know what you need, don't be afraid to open up and say that. Don't be afraid to ask. And I really love how you shared who you were, Dee, and you didn't share that alone. You shared it with the community. You help other people to grow. You help other people to move from there. Kristy, what's your story?
So I have a number of stories, so I'm just going to tell more big picture. Life's not a straight line. You will make many pivots throughout the course of your career. Earlier in my career, I worked at a big tech company. The Great Recession hit, and we went from 150 employees to 30 employees overnight, and we had to pivot and focus the business on how we made money. I was on the founding team of a startup that started as one thing and pivoted to something entirely different within 2 years. I worked in one industry and then pivoted to a completely different industry. I'm now CEO of a company that was doing 1,000 in-person events a year. We, within weeks, moved everything online and have completely focused our business on different ways of connecting, different ways of community building. So life is a series of small pivots and big pivots. And with all of that, the few things that have helped me is one, being curious. I'm an incredibly curious person. I read a lot of newsletters. I follow people in different industries. I want to know the bigger world outside of just, the small sandbox that I play in. Two, tap into community and tap into diverse communities. It is so important that you're not in an echo chamber, that you are learning from other people, different experiences, different ideas, different perspectives that will only make you stronger. And the third is don't be afraid of failure. I think when we talk about pivots, we're afraid to move to the next thing because what if it doesn't work off? What if you feel like you're jumping off that cliff and you fail? And that's okay. You're pivoting because going on that straight road the same way you've been going does not work anymore. And you need to get off that road onto a new one. Sometimes you're building your own road while you do it. But pivoting and taking risks is not, it's scary, but it's exciting, it's exhilarating, it's pushing yourself in your life to new directions, to new opportunities, to new possibilities. So all of those different time periods and different pivots, I've only become stronger because of it. One quick story is when I moved from one industry to a completely different one. That can be overwhelming when you're looking for a job. You think there's so many, you could be a million different titles, work for a million different companies. It's such a big decision, and that feels overwhelming. And oftentimes when you feel overwhelmed, it feels hard to move forward. So I quickly tapped into a bunch of people in my first degree network, people I knew well, and then asked them who else should I talk to, and asked them who else should I talk to, and had a series of 5-minute conversations with people. What do you do? Why do you like it? Would you recommend it to somebody else? And I took all of that data and thought, well, what resonates to me? What doesn't resonate to me? And then kept moving forward based on getting all that different information. So tap into community and don't be afraid of failure. Believe in yourself, and it can be exciting.
Wow. I am super appreciative of those tips. I was taking notes myself. So let's jump into some questions, because we've shared a lot of personal connection. We've shared our story. We've talked about how we've taken our skills and transferred them, and how we've sown into others, things that we've done to engage, making sure that we're not afraid of raising our hands, asking questions. One question is networks. So I believe is speak about if you're a woman or a minority and you're in a male-dominated environment or career, can you talk a little bit about what that looks like, or any suggestions that you might have?
Okay, could the question be asked again? I think it was choppy. Is it the first question by Paula?
It is in the Q&A, not in the chat.
Yeah, so my simple line, I'll defer and give it to my panelists. Yeah, absolutely networks help, right? So one of the things AnitaB.org is known for is Hoa Sisters community. And the Sisters community was founded by Hoa namesake Anita Borg. We actually rebranded to AnitaB.org. It's like a play with a .org domain extension. Okay, you'll see it. But that being said, the Sisters community is actually really tight as it relates to encouraging women in tech. That's why women are allowed, and they share honest stories about what it is to be a woman in tech, situations that happen on site. And I really do know that to have this space to share authentically about either harassment or about negotiation or about promotion or about jobs, it really allows you to see another day. And it also allows you to have that time to talk to someone specifically about it. So like, you have to use a network accordingly. You can't just stay quiet though, because then you're in a network and you're not saying nothing. So there's no net, right? Coming out of it, right? So that's my POV, and I'll share with, others will share, but it's power. It's power. There's power when you're able to articulate something that's not right. You know it could possibly be better, and then take the steps and have others help you to understand what steps you could take, because then you're not stuck in your own mind.
That's good. That's good. Can you all still hear me clearly? Thumbs up? Yes. Dee, can you talk a little bit about that if you have a suggestion? Male-dominated field, what that looks like. Any tips there?
So I used to work in the entertainment industry. I worked for a couple of movie studios. And as has been revealed to the world, it's rife with sexual harassment and bullying and everything else on top of that. And so it was a very lonely environment to navigate. There was no real sense of sisterhood. There was no one you could really talk to about it, because you really, feared for your job. There was a lot of aggression, and that's, maybe you can't tell, but it's not really my personality. I definitely, skew to the, more gentle side of things. And so for me, having a network of people, and especially, of women who look like me, to be able to have those like really honest conversations with is, it's vital, because even if you can to some extent bring your full self to work, like there's still a version of full that you're bringing to work. Like you still need to be professional, you still need to ensure that you are putting your best foot forward. And so there are just things you're not going to do, and that, quite frankly, you shouldn't do in a professional environment if you want to get ahead. And so where do you, where's the outlet for all of that frustration? Also, where do you have those conversations with people who might be going through the same things? And that's like the key to a peer-to-peer network, is that you're hearing from people who have been through the same things, have navigated the same things, and can bring different perspectives to the table. And I think so much, especially, as a Black woman, there are things you read about how to get ahead, or how to ask for a pay rise, or how to negotiate, that don't necessarily apply to us, because there are impressions that people might have of me before I've even walked into the room that won't necessarily allow for me to tackle the problem in the way that everyone else might. And so you need to understand from someone who kind of understands your experience about like how to go into that room. But there's a really interesting example of that where I'm also in a network of Black female founders. Mm-hmm. And so they tell you, when you're pitching, like, lead with your idea and how you're going to make money, and then your bio and all of the rest of it. Well, actually, a lot of Black women founders don't do that, because they know that when they walk into a room, there's an assumption being made about the depth of their abilities and what they can bring to the table. So a lot of them actually lead with their credentials. This is what I've achieved, so that we can sort of put that to rest and then go into everything else. So there are those are the sort of subtle things you're only really going to get from a sisterhood or a network where you're having those conversations freely and openly. So that's why I would advise it.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That really resonated with me, and I saw you breathe. So one of the things that I do is I pay attention to our voice, and I think we're wrapping up The only other thing that I would keep in mind and that we may want to share if we have just a second is many of us are at different points and stages in our lives, whether it be that we're entering the workforce or, after 20 years because we've been laid off, or we're coming in as a millennial. There's so many different spaces. And being who you are, each of our panelists, thank you, Kristy, Dee, Tasha, thank you so much for this today. Thank you, Power to Fly. Thank you so much for bringing us together to allow us to talk about some of the things we're dealing with, to have a safe space, to make a difference, starting with us. So thank you so much for having us. Thank you for having me. This has been great. Thanks, panelists.
Hi, thank you.
Yes, I'm definitely just echoing everything Landi said. I'm really appreciative to the vulnerability and to all the stories you shared. This was very valuable in talking about different things. And I love the Excel sheet. I think that was a really great idea. So I just want to say thank you so much, Kristy, and thank you so much, Landi and Tasha and Dee. Thank you so much for being with us and concluding our future work track for today.